So I believe that we should be recording now. Like I said, I really appreciate you joining me tonight. I know everyone has super busy schedules, and I know that this is kind of a extra thing. So please do not feel obliged if other things come up, if you have to rush to other things. I completely understand that, or if in the coming weeks you're not able to join. But I want to make a little bit of space and time, even in my asynchronous online classes, for us to be able to meet and have live interaction in case you have any questions about anything that we're tackling each week. So at the moment, you should be seeing a screen of mine. It's a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not actually putting it on the presentation mode since I'm operating from only one screen so that I don't lose all the chat and everything else. But I did have one of these sessions earlier this week, I believe on Wednesday, and I did record that session. So the content is going to be very similar to that. Also, for anyone who might be watching this recording later on, I don't expect there to be hugely different material that we're going to cover today, but it is always possible. It kind of, these sessions are really what the needs from the class are, what comes up. Sorry about the meowing on the background. It's my cat. I'm working from home tonight, so she definitely wants to be part of what we're doing. So my plan for today was to really quickly introduce myself. It'd be great if you're willing to share a few words about yourself, but there's absolutely no pressure. Talk a little bit about the key things that I think, if I was a student, that I'd be really curious about. And I think that the biggest things that I'd be very curious is that how do I get that A, or how do I get that good grade? So what are the assignments? What's required from me? And what does the attendance requirement for this course look like? I was also planning to mention a couple of words about these sessions, one of these that we're having now, and give a really quick overview of what we're trying to accomplish during this semester that we have together. I want to acknowledge that you are doing an accelerated 8-week course. So normally we offer this course throughout 16 weeks. So we're kind of moving at this twice of the speed of a normal. So that might sometimes make it seem like there's a lot of material that's being dumped on you or a lot of homework, but you do get the same amount of credits as anyone would be getting who's completing the course as a 16-week course. So it's just a reality that we have to navigate with. Having said that, and I'm always very transparent and very, very honest with my students, having said all of that, I do want to acknowledge that we had some unexpected staffing changes in our division, and I picked up teaching this class with about a week's notice. I've taught this class many, many, many times, both in person and online, but I had not thought it with this particular setup. So I did have to hustle a little bit to get your online class set up. And for that reason, it is possible that sometimes oversights happen. And like anyone, I respect that my students sometimes might make mistakes. I want to be transparent that sometimes there's a chance that I make mistakes as well. So if something doesn't add up, if something doesn't work, if there's questions that you're questioning, that is this question quite right, do not hesitate to let me know. I really do acknowledge that it normally takes a little longer than a week to develop a good class. And obviously I'll be working on this class over the next 8 weeks with you. So whenever we catch things, we'll change them around. I wanted to mention a couple of words about the syllabus as well, because there are a couple of important things that I need to make sure that I mention. And the next item on the agenda is to talk a little bit about disability services and disability resources that we offer as an institution. I think it's something that sometimes we don't spend enough time thinking about. We want all of our students to succeed. And if there are circumstances or reasons why you might not be able to accomplish everything in a traditional setting, we want to make sure that we offer you whatever is needed to set you up for success. So you can focus on the actual material and not fight with the what I would describe as other barriers. Um, I will say a couple of words about my teaching philosophy as well. And really, my main focus for today was to kind of talk you through and show you what to expect in terms of the two chapters that we had assigned for today or this week. I kind of think that since you have the pre-recorded lecture videos and you have a very good textbook, I don't want to go too much into detail of that, but if there's ever any hard topics, difficult areas of the chapter that I'm aware of based on my experience, or if any questions come up, I plan that these sessions are a chance to address those. Finally, one thing that I wanted to spend a little bit of time is to kind of walk you through some of the homework to kind of show you what to expect and get you up to speed for that. But if at any stage you have questions, if at any stage you want to ask something that even if it wouldn't be on the topics that we're addressing at that very moment, this is really your time and space. So I'm more than happy to deviate from this plan. So I guess that the best way for me to start would be to ask that, do you have any burning questions that you want to address or you want to ask from me? I know that we have a technical issue with one of the attendees' access to the online publisher's online homework page, and we'll troubleshoot that on one-on-one basis after this session. But do we have any other urgent things that are pressing on your mind?
Oh, I do have a question.
Of course.
Oh, if there is a time limit for the quizzes we're going to take?
I believe that there's no time limit on the homework quizzes. That's how I intended to set them up.
Mm.
However, homework is due. There's a due date for every week's homework, and the due date is 1 minute before midnight at the Sunday night. So I'm asking you to cover either one or two. Typically, it's two learning modules per week, but you can take as long as you wish. So in full transparency, kind of expanding on that, my recommendation, and this came up in our earlier meeting this week, my recommendation is that you use your textbook as the primary study means. I'm also offering pre-recorded lectures. I'm also offering all kinds of other summaries and handouts and animations and all sorts of things. Because I've been doing this for a long time. I had those available and I wanted to make them available for you. But your textbook really should be what you're working from, because the quiz questions are exactly from the textbook. And I want to be fully transparent. I think that the quiz questions sometimes are very, very detailed. So what I recommend for my students to do is to consider a quiz as kind of a way to guide your reading. So you can have the textbook open on the side at the same time as you're taking the quiz. So quiz is not something that you should sit onto it and think that you need to know the answers from the top of your head at the very moment when you're taking it. Actually, this platform that you'll be using for taking quizzes links really nicely with the textbook in an electronic format. So if you're working on a question and you're kind of uncertain what's the right answer, you can click a button on that question, and it will throw you to the textbook, to the very section where that topic is addressed, so you can actually find the answer from the text. So there's no time limit in terms of how long you can take to complete the quiz. And I believe that if I have not done it yet, I will definitely do it, but I believe that you can even attempt the quizzes multiple times. So it really is not something that's supposed to be a stressful thing to do. It's more of guiding you to how to tackle the material. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. I got it for now. I got it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I don't want you to be stressed. I promise that that's my first and foremost promise for you. I've been doing this for quite a while, and I find that students learn better when they don't have to stress about things. So, really, the idea is that you can take all the time that you wish during the week to work through those homework assignments. Once we get to the exams and practicals, there's a little bit of different way how we do those, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Any other burning questions? In that case, um, what I normally do, I spend a little bit of time with my students, getting to know them. Sometimes I've tried discussion forums. I don't think I built one for this class, just to get you know a little bit more. There is absolutely no pressure, but if you feel comfortable during this, our little session today, to share if you have any particular career goals or particular goals for this class. Let's say that if you're chasing an A grade because you need it for your GPA or as a prerequisite for something, or if you're, for example, a lot of students of mine are pursuing these classes as a prerequisites for nursing degree or degree in dental hygienists degree or medical imaging, various different careers. It always helps me if I know about that, but this is by no means not putting anyone on the spot. If you don't feel comfortable sharing, don't feel you have to, but I would love to have an idea if you're comfortable sharing that. Do you have any particular goals, whether it's career-wise, whether it's study-wise, that you think that I should know, I should have an idea?
Oh, I'm taking this class because it's one of my required courses. I have to take 201 and 202, and will be covered one course at ASU. That's why I'm taking it for now. And yeah,
That's awesome. Well, we'll make sure that you will have a good experience. Like I said, I've been teaching these classes, BIO201, 202, for probably over a decade at this point. So we'll make sure that it's going to be educational, but it's not going to burn you out.
right, I got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Any others who want to share? And it's completely okay if you don't feel comfortable right now sharing. So I'll share really quickly. I know you're not on this class to learn about me. That's okay. I know that the audio issues are challenging, but feel free to join us through the chat as things come to your mind, if questions come up or so on. I'm just really grateful to have you here. But I know you're not on this class really to learn about me, but I think it sometimes helps students to have an idea who is teaching you and how did they end up doing what they're doing. So I'll mention really quickly a few words, but before that, we got introduction through the chat. So let's have a look. So taking this class as a prerequisite for a nursing program. That's awesome. Pretty much, what would I say? About 80% of my students, 85% of my students are on the same path as you are. So actually, my personal office at the institution is located amongst with the nursing faculty. So we work very, very closely together in terms of setting you up for success with what they expect that you know when you walk to the nursing classes on day one. So you're in good hands, and I'm promising that we'll set you up for success for that. Awesome. So a couple of words, obviously, with a name like mine. I'm not from Arizona originally. I was actually born and raised in northern Scandinavia, so northern part of the Europe. And I've had a pleasure and privilege, and I've been very lucky to travel around the world, live around the world, and Arizona is where I have landed at the moment. My real background is really in medicine. I used to do a lot more medical research. That was my full day-to-day job. I do a little less of that these days, so I'm more focused on teaching these days. But what you're seeing on the screen is not going to be on the exam, but you're seeing four different pictures of what we would see if we were looking at a patient's heart with an MRI scanner. So I used to do a lot of cardiac MR research, and the picture that you see at the right bottom corner is actually really the typical picture that we would acquire of someone's heart when we are looking at it with an MRI scanner. Heart is located in a very awkward, weird angle in the body, so it doesn't align with most body planes that we typically see. So this is a short axis view. We see the big left ventricle, the kind of a round circular shape, and right next to it we see the right ventricle on this picture on the left-hand side. Remember that we're always looking at the patient's right and left-hand side. You would see lung around the heart as this kind of a dotted area, and then probably liver underneath there, the structure that we're seeing. So these pictures are pictures that we normally would get with an MRI scanner that you're seeing. And if you look really, really closely, the heart muscle shows up as dark on that picture, but they're right at the bottom of the left ventricle. There's this kind of a brighter spot closer to the inside of the left ventricle. And this bright area is something that we're able to illustrate with MRI scanner if someone is having insufficient oxygen and nutrient supply to the heart. So the heart tissue then, like any other tissue, requires constant supply of those, and there would be tissue death. So that shows up bright on these medical imaging techniques that we can do with MRI scanner. And that's what we had for a long time as the only way of looking at the heart. The sad part is that this picture will tell the tissue that's dead. It's dead, there's nothing we can do. But it turns out that there's an amazing little physiological process that happens whenever there's a risk that a tissue of the heart muscle is not receiving sufficient oxygen, sufficient nutrients, and so on. Actually, the water that's normally located inside the cells leaks out from the cell or moves from the cell to the space around the cell, so extracellular space. And this happens about 8, 12, even a little longer than that, 24 hours before the tissue actually dies. So we get kind of an early warning sign that if we don't treat the blockage in the coronary artery for this patient, this amount of tissue will get damaged. So these two top pictures that you're seeing is what my research group was focusing on, how we are able to illustrate before the damage has happened, the extent of potential damage. So we have a way of kind of estimating, is it worthwhile to do a very invasive procedure, because you know that everything that we do in medicine has also side effects. So sometimes we do not want to do an invasive procedure if the damage is small and it's already happened. We don't want to make the situation worse. For example, if the patient is particularly vulnerable for side effects. So that's my background. That's what I've done a lot, but that's certainly not the only thing I've done. I actually started my career as a conservator restorer, so working with mainly archaeological findings from excavation sites. I worked a lot on the excavation sites with objects that were either directly attached or closely attached to the human bodies, human remains that we found. And obviously, at that point, I was thinking that I probably should go back to school and learn something about human body. And that's exactly what I did for my undergrad and postgrad in human anatomy. Pretty soon, while working on those archaeological sites, I realized also I was working a lot with mummified corpses and mummies and so on, that you can't just unwrap a mummy to have a look inside it and then wrap it back in, because it's not going to be the same thing afterwards. So we should come up with a way to look inside these human remains. And that's how I went back to the school to learn about medical imaging. And I ended up doing MRI scan, working with MRI scanners a lot. So that's how I ended up there. But that's by no means the only field of medical imaging that I've done. I have done a lot of ultrasound. I actually taught ultrasound imaging in a private medical school here in Phoenix area for many years. I've done basic clinical research, and while I was doing that, I was feeling a little unease that, okay, how do we navigate this? That private schools are expensive. I would love to see greater representation of all kinds of students in those schools. And a few colleagues of mine needed someone to cover their classes in a local community college. And while I was doing that, helping out as a favor, I realized that community colleges are really the great equalizer in making sure that all students have an access to an education that allows them to pursue any dreams or any career goals that they might have. And I've stayed in the community college field ever since then. I've taught in a few different community colleges. I still teach in a few different colleges, a few different universities, but it is with Chandler Gilbert that I'm working full time and hold a professorship here. So you're getting the same course as you would get in any other university for this course, but I think it's just, I feel that community colleges are a really good place to get those classes and get those courses completed. So that's a little bit of my background. So really quickly, I know that both of you have done really nicely. I'm looking at my notes, and I think that both of you have done a good job of getting assignments submitted. So we did have the syllabus quiz, which was due yesterday. So thank you for doing that. In addition, every week you will have either one or two or other number of chapters that we will cover. And for each chapter, you will have a quiz, and then you will have a practice anatomy to complete. Quiz is basically just a set of questions that help you to make sure that you've covered everything you need to cover on that chapter of the content of the textbook, kind of a way to make sure that you read to the level of detail that you need to. Like I said, I encourage you to use textbook to answer to those quizzes, and there's no time limit, and I'm more than happy for you to take those as many times as you wish, that you get the score that you want. These practice anatomy assignments instead are assignments which really kind of guide you to look at pictures of whether it's actual dissection specimens or diagrams or models. So not just read, but look at the material. So they're very much what we consider in this field as practicals, allowing you to apply especially the anatomy component of this course. Obviously, on the first week, there's a little less anatomical structures to look at. The amount of anatomical structures will increase as we move further on this course. The reason why I really want you to do the quizzes and I want you to do the practice anatomies is that those, first of all, add up towards the points towards your final grade for this course. So it's worthwhile to collect those easy points during the week. But in addition to that, in your exams, and we will have 3 exams and 3 practicals, in those exam questions are pretty much exactly, there might be slight adjustments, but they are very much the same questions that you have seen in your quizzes already. So it's worth of doing those. I apologize, it's my cat. It's worth of doing those quizzes because you're basically already are able to prepare for what will come up in the exam. I see a question in the chat about how does the exam work. Well, with the exams, you will take the exam in a single setting and you only try it once. And there is a time limit. You're not going to run out of time. I give a generous amount of time in a sense that really most of the questions are questions that are multiple choice or putting things in order or matching things. Typically, a student takes about 5 seconds to answer to one question in an exam, and you will have 1 minute per question in exam. So that might sound very scary, but really the only reason why I put a time limit there is that all of my exams and all of my practicals, unless something happens, so I always reserve a right to make changes if there's a lot of cheating or if there's other things happening, but all of my exams, all of my practicals are open book, so they're not proctored, so you do not need to go to a specific place to take them. You don't need to use a lockdown browser or anything like that. It really is that you can use your notes, you can use whatever you have available, you can use your textbook, and the questions in the exam are the same questions that you had from the quizzes. So really doing those quizzes is really to preparing for that exam. There's not going to be every single question from every single quiz that you've done before in an exam. There will be selected questions, and I promise that they're very, very doable. I'm glad that that made sense. I'm following the chat at the same time. So I promise that you will have plenty enough time to do the exam since it's open book. The only reason why I put a time limit there is that if I had a student, and I'm not saying that you would be that student, but if I had a student who has never in their life during this course opened the textbook, if you start to read the textbook while you're taking the exam for the very first time, you're probably not going to do that hot in that exam. But if you have done your homework, if you know where to find the answers in the textbook, you will ace it. And really, for me, what's important is that you don't have to remember every single bone in the body. You have to know where to find the answers as they come up. Same is true for the practical exams. So practical exams show you pictures that you have already worked through in the practice anatomy. So it's just selected the most important ones, and you kind of get a chance to use your notes. So I really encourage my students to take good notes as they're working through the material. In addition, on a few of the chapters, I have also a third type of assignment for you, which is called food for thought assignment. It's kind of an application question about the topic that we've been looking on that chapter. Typically, it's a short, maybe 3 to 4 sentences long mini paragraph where you answer to some questions that I presented for you regarding that topic. We won't have that for every chapter, but they will pop up here and there on the homework as well. I think we already did a good job talking about the exams. So just to clarify, there will be 3 exams and there will be 3 practicals, and there will not be like a final exam. Once you've completed the exam on those chapters, we move on to new chapters. I see a question in the chat that where can you find a food for thought? I don't have a food for thought assignment for every chapter, so you don't have any for this week. As we look at the syllabus, I'll point out where we will have those, but don't worry about that just yet. It's not coming up just yet. And I provide you materials how to tackle the food for thought questions. So you're never left of just having to figure it out. I will point you where to look for the answers. I hope that that kind of makes sense. If not, we'll revisit that once we get to that week. Perfect. I see on the chat that it makes sense. Really quickly, like I said, we will have these meetings. I think that it was a little hard to find a time that works for everyone. So I realize if neither of these times works for you, I apologize. We will still go ahead and have these. If I don't have any attendance on one or another, we might then change things around. But I will always record record these meetings. So I've scheduled that we have these live online optional meetings on Wednesday from 1 to 2 and on Thursday evening from 8 to 9. And we'll keep with those meeting times. But like I said, they're not required. They're just an extra resource available for you. And I'll try to set them up so that it's not a last minute link that gets posted. We're still figuring a few things out ourselves. So, and also you don't need to attend to both and you don't need to watch both recordings. It's going to be the same material covered on both meetings of each week. Really quickly, I wanted to show what we're covering this semester on our course. During the first week, we really look at key terms, key body systems, kind of a review of that, certain body regions, different kinds of movements that your body can do. So it's very much of a week of getting you set up, that what is anatomy and physiology and what is the language that we're going to be using on that. Then we'll kind of do a quick review of the tissues during this course. Just this should be a revision from BIO 181 or BIO 156, whatever prereq class you've taken, just reminding different tissues in the body. We'll spend time talking about the integumentary system, which is really your skin and the associated structures, so hair, nails, that glands, that sort of stuff. Then we'll kind of start thinking about skeletal systems. So we'll have an introduction to what bone is, and we'll talk about cartilages. And once we've gone through all of that material, we'll take our first exam and first practical. I haven't listed the practical there, but we'll take a first exam and first practical. There's not a specific week reserved for exam and practical. There's just kind of as an additional thing to do on that week in addition to your normal homework. Because really, they're not going to take you that long. It's just a way for you to check that, okay, I've covered now all of these homeworks. What do I remember from those homeworks that I did? And like I said, I encourage my students to take notes. You can do whatever is your strategy, taking pictures, screenshots, printing, taking your own notes of any quiz questions that you find challenging or find worth of making a note of. Same for the practical. Then for the second section of this course, we'll talk about skeleton. On that part, we'll go through all of the bones in the body, at least the most important ones. We'll even go to more detail, looking at different bumps in different bones and different characteristics. So it's not just naming the bone, it's also knowing the parts of the bone. Then we'll have a look of articulations between bones, so the joints between the bones, and we'll have a look of what muscle tissue is, kind of understanding the basics of that system, what muscles are made of. And then we'll move on and spend time looking at the actual skeletal muscles. So the big muscles that move your body, we'll go through most of those to form a good idea. And again, after that, we'll take an exam and we'll take a practical to kind of revise that material that we've covered. And during the final third of this course, we'll focus on your nervous system. So we'll start by talking a little bit of introduction on nervous system, what is a neuron, and so on. We'll talk about central nervous system, which is essentially your brain and spinal cord. We'll also have a look of peripheral nervous system and autonomic nervous system, and then different senses. And we'll wrap up by taking an exam and practical of that. I do want to give a quick shout out that during the final week of the semester, you don't have until end of the week to do the assignments. I have less assignments for this week, but I'm asking you to make sure that you get them in earlier before the end of the week, because our semester ends, I believe, on Thursday of that week. I apologize for the guest star. She's really eager to be part of. So, having said all that, I really quickly would like to browse through a couple of things from the syllabus. I'm sorry, you need to move now. From the syllabus, just to make sure that I've spoken about those and just to make sure that you've seen those. But before I move on to that, do you have any questions about things that we've covered so far that haven't came up in the chat? That's perfect. If no questions at this time. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to share a different screen. And I know that you are all very, very capable and very successful in your own field. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I do want to show my screen. And what you're seeing is what you would see on the Canvas course as you log in. It looks a little different, my view from the student view. So I have a lot of things that I haven't made available for you to see. But you'll see that this week I'm asking you to complete 2 modules, week 1A and also week 1B. So you'll be covering the chapters 1 and chapter 5. And for each of those chapters, I have a quiz and I have a practice anatomy for you to do. You'll notice that the material for the module 1B is much shorter because it really is just revision of the things that you already know. In terms of the syllabus is a resource that many students often find answers to the questions that they want to ask from me. I won't spend too much time on that because I want to be respectful of your time, but I do offer office hours every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday from 1 to 3 in the afternoon, and they are remotely available for you. Those appointments or those office hours linked to those should show up on your calendar when you click on to that on the on Canvas. I also am happy to organize an appointment, whether you want it to be a virtual or whether you want it to be in person at other time if that's something that you want to do. I'm gonna just quickly browse forward. Like I said, we have a custom edition for the textbook and also the publisher's materials that you'll be using. You already have automatically access to that simply by being enrolled to that course, so you do not need to buy additional materials. I already mentioned I don't use lockdown browser and online proctoring unless something starts happening. If I see that there's cheating happening, then we'll revisit that thing. There's different kinds of things that I'm asking you to do every week. Really, the big thing is to do the quizzes and practice anatomies. I mentioned those food for thoughts. Like I said, they're just a chance to apply what you've already noticed. If you look on this screen that I'm sharing, exams and practicals are worth quite a bit of points. So I would really encourage you to make sure that you take all of those. Collecting those little points from quizzes and practice anatomies throughout each week and throughout each chapter is definitely worthwhile, but you'll get the big points towards your final grade by taking the exam and taking the practical tests. So those are definitely worth of. I will offer, if necessary, throughout the semester chances to collect also additional extra credit. If at any point your grade isn't where you want it to be, communicate with me. Don't leave it to the last night, but I will work with you to make sure that we can get you to where you need to be in terms of the grade. Here's how the points add up, and really all you need is 91% for an A. So you do not need to have full marks for everything, you just need to have cumulative 91% or a 90%, I believe, on this course, and you will get an A. So we simply do a letter grade for this course. I'm also wanting to just mention real quickly, let's see if there's anything else that I need to mention. Remember, you have online tutoring available for you through the college as well. And here's the course calendar showing each assignment and when it's due. With this course calendar, pay attention that I have for the most weeks 2 units for you to do, or 2 modules for you to do. So week 1 we have module 1A and 1B, and you have assignments for each of those. Week 2, next week, you only have 1 module, but it contains 2 chapters to work through, and then it moves on and on and on. And like I said, with exam and practical, those are on the same week as you are completing new chapters. So it is worth of thinking them as work through the chapters and make sure that you still have time to take the exam and you have time to take the practical as well. And that's what the format that we'll be doing until we get to the week 8, which is the final week. So there was a question, when will you see food for thought? The first food for thought assignment will be on week 3. That's when you'll see it for the first time. So nothing to worry about it just yet. And it is going to be very, very clear, very simple assignments. There's no curveballs. I'm pretty transparent of how I do things. Obviously, I want to mention that there is a chance that I might make changes. I'm glad that it sounds good, that there is a chance that I might make changes as needed. So I always reserve that chance as well if something comes up in terms of the class needs. I'm aware of the time, so I want to be respectful of that. I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint and point out a couple of things. But if any questions come to your mind, if you have anything that you want to get clarification, don't hesitate to drop it on the chat or just unmute yourself. What I wanted to show here is that you will be completing most of the homeworks on the Macro Hill, so our Publishers Connect. It is linked with your Canvas, and those grades will automatically populate to the Canvas. All of the exams and practicals are completed on Canvas. The easiest way to get hold of me is by messaging to me through Canvas. I get in a typical day about 200 to 300 emails, so sometimes things do slide past me. If you send it to my email, I will always try to answer to that. But if at any point, whether you message to me through Canvas messages or email, you don't hear back from me in about a day or so, during weekends I might take a couple of days, resend that message. I will eventually answer. I'm usually really quick and really good about that, but it is possible. I do have a large student population that sometimes things just slide past me, so don't hesitate to remind me. Just send the same message time and time again, and I will eventually answer to you. I won't spend time on this too much, but I want to remind you that our institution wants to make sure that all students have a chance to succeed in our classes. So if you have a disability and you have documentation about that, we will make arrangements to make sure that you have optimal chances to succeed in all of our classes. So let's say if you had an accommodation plan at the high school, it's probably worth considering, would you like to go and meet with our Disability Resource Services team so they can set up resources for you that maximize your chances of success. What happens when you meet with them? Those meetings are completely confidential. I'll never know what you discuss with them or what the possible disability is. All that will happen is that I will get instructions from them that if a student has a good reason to have accommodations, and those all I get is just what those accommodations are. Typically, they're like extra time in an exam or longer notice or adjusted due dates, things like that. So do consider using that resource. I'm really here not to catch you out. I will always help you to reach your goals. If you're willing to put in the effort, I will put in the effort. We're in this together, and I have never had a student who would not have done well if they have kept working, if they have done their homework, if they have completed their assignments, exams, practicals. As long as you're putting in the effort, I will make sure that you're going to do well and you're going to ace this class. So at this point, I wanted to again kind of leave a little break and check if you have any questions. This is what I was planning to do. Like I said, I'm not going to go through the lecture material since you have that available on your Canvas course. And like I said, I encourage you to use your textbook. Let me just share my screen for the Canvas course just to make a couple of points that I wanted to share. So again, we should be back where we were before. Let's go to our learning modules. Like I said, use your textbook. That is a great resource. You've already paid for it. It's available for you electronically. Read through that text and take that textbook on the side as you're working through the quizzes and practice anatomy. You'll notice though that I do provide you a lot of other additional material that might be helpful, including PowerPoints and so on. What I was gonna do though, since we have about 10 minutes still together scheduled, during our Wednesday meeting, which is available for you as a recording, I showed to those attendees on that meeting that what does a quiz look like, in case someone didn't yet have a chance to explore those, so that there's no curveballs, so you know what to expect. So we literally went through the questions from the quiz 1 and questions from the practice anatomy 1. So if you're curious about those, you can refer to that recording, and I thought it'd be nice if we do the same for the quiz 2 at least, so you have an idea what it looks like. But also, since you're here, I want to make it worth your time, and I want to make sure that you're actually getting a little bit of help with how to tackle that quiz. I stopped sharing the screen on purpose. Let me just pull up the quiz. So literally, when you're using the canvas, when you click on that quiz, it will throw you to the publisher's website where you'll be taking the quiz. And my view looks, again, a little different, not drastically, but a little different. So I'm sharing my screen once again. So you'll see roughly what to expect. So on Chapter 5 quiz, there will be 12 questions. It's going to add up to 10 points in total. And let's work through at least some of those questions. So Chapter 5 is all about different types of tissues. So the first question that you will be presented is asking you what are the 4 primary types of tissues, and it's giving you multiple choice options for answer. And you should remember, and if you don't remember by reading textbook, you will be reminded that the 4 primary tissue types are epithelial, muscular, connective, and nervous tissue. So it's really as simple as that, multiple choice to answer to those questions. The second question on this quiz asks you which of the following terms describes a thin slice of tissue mounted on a microscopic slide. That is going to be histological section. So you have cells and you have tissues. When you're studying tissues, you're studying histology. You're studying what the tissues, the cells that make up the tissue looks like. So it's a histological section that we're seeing when we take a thin slice of a tissue and look at it under the microscope. Sometimes we might stain that samples to make certain characteristics pop up and make more visible. You'll also notice that you have a chance to use different hints and also open up in your view. There will be a button here on the left-hand side, open up the textbook on that part of the material if you're stuck with the question. The third question on this quiz is a little different setup. In this question type, you're clicking and dragging the statements, the little boxes that you have into the right, under the right headings. So here we're seeing 2 types of epithelia, and you're being asked to define whether the statement describes simple or stratified epithelia. So in a simple epithelia, it's just a single layer of cells. So every cell touches the basement membrane, the bottom layer. So there's only one layer of cells in a simple epithelia. Whereas on stratified epithelia, you have multiple layers. So some of those cells are piled on top of the others. So that's the big difference between the two. The statement that simple epithelia allows for rapid diffusion of substances can be considered that we have an easy way to cross this membrane made by this epithelia because it's only one single cell thick. So it's really easy for materials to move across it. Whereas on a stratified epithelia where we have multiple layers, it's a little harder to move through this layer. Simple epithelia typically lines the lumens of many structures, such as renal tubules of the kidneys. So this is an example of a simple epithelia that you're seeing there. Stratified instead, stratified epithelia is really good at resisting abrasions, so it protects the layers below because we have all these many layers. It's found on the superficial surface of the skin, so skin is made of many layers of cells. The outermost ones are dead, so skin is a good example of stratified epithelia. Stratified epithelia is also found in sweat gland ducts. So those sweat gland ducts go through multiple layers, and they are also made of multiple layers of stratified cells. And some stratified epithelia, such as we've got a few examples, could be keratinized. We see that in structures that have a stronger layers, such as nails would have a lot of high amounts of keratin and so on. So this is really how these quizzes work. It's either multiple choice, drag and drop. Here in the next question, we're asked about which of the statements is false about epithelial tissue. So all of these four statements are correct, but the one statement that is not correct says that epithelial tissue is composed of cells and a thick vascular matrix. That is not true. That doesn't apply to epithelial tissues. All other statements are correct. So read the question very carefully when you're tackling it. The next question that we're seeing here, that tissue found at surface is composed of one or more layers of closely adhering cells, is called epithelial tissue. So we were talking already earlier on about epithelia and stratified epithelia. So you complete in this question the statement by choosing the most correct option. In this case, it would be the epithelial tissue. Here we're doing a little different kind of a question. You have statements or sentences, and you're dragging a single word to replace a blank space where you would see these blue answers. So this is already answered, completed statements, but in your view, there would be a blank space. So you can complete the sentences. Epithelial tissue can be classified according to the cell shape and number of layers. So then you drag the classified there. One layer of cells is called, and then there's a blank, and you would drag there simple. So single layer of cells is a simple epithelia, whereas multiple layers is called stratified. Thin, flat, scaly cells are squamous. Cuboidal cells are either rounded or square in shape, especially in cross-section. Columnar cells are taller than they are wide. They look like columns, like pillars. And pseudostratified cells look more like one layer because of the arrangement of the cell's nuclei, even though there's actually multiple layers. So pseudo means that it's kind of a fake. It pretends to be something that it's not. You can think of pseudoscience as an example. Really quickly, a couple of other questions, and then we'll wrap up. I'll just show up. Epithelium within a single layer of tall cells would be classified as simple columnar epithelia. So remember, it's going to be epithelial, and then we're now looking, it's a single layer, so it's going to be simple. It's shaped as these columns, so it's columnar. If these questions feel like a lot, don't worry. Once you read through the textbook, it will become easier. But there are also questions where you have multiple correct answers, so always pay attention to the question. Here you're asked to check all that apply regarding functions of connective tissue, and we'll see that all of these are functions of the connective tissue. Connective tissues support internal frame of the body, are important in energy storage, play a role in hormone transport. For example, in blood is a type of connective tissue, protect vital organs, form the structural framework of an organ such as a liver. So all of the options would have been correct in this question. Sometimes we also have questions where I'm asking you to type in the answer to complete the sentence. So here we're seeing that the tissue that is specialized for communication by means of electrical and chemical signals is known as a nervous tissue. So you would type that into that box where it's asking you to complete that sentence. Here I have a different kind of a question. We've already seen this a little bit. You've seen here you're seeing statements and you're being asked whether it's true or false about the specimen that you're seeing here. And what we're seeing here, I think, is gonna be muscle cells, and you're then asked to answer what can you see of that picture of those particular muscle cells. So you track the correct answers, whether it's true or false, in relation to what you're seeing. So we're seeing here cardiac muscle cells. Cardiac muscle cells have one nucleus per cell. They are involuntary. They have the central nucleus. They branch. They have intercalated discs which connect the cells to each other, and so on and so on. Other statements are incorrect. A couple of more questions that we can see when we're looking at the different muscle types that we're seeing here. We're seeing skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle, the histology. On this picture, you're not really seeing that because I already have the answers laid on top, but you would look at those, you would use your textbook and then choose the right boxes to describe each one, each different type of muscle that you're seeing in this case. Again, fill in a blank by typing in the correct answer question, where we're seeing that the study of tissues is called histology. So we saw that earlier on. So that's really largely what the quizzes would look like and what I'm expecting. I'm mindful of the time, so I want to respect if you need to jump off. For those who have, let's say, still 5 more minutes, I will also show what to expect to see in terms of the practice anatomy for chapter 5. But if you do need to be going, I totally understand it. I normally try to be very, very strict that I stick to the schedule. So let me just show really quickly what you might see in terms of the practice anatomy. Like I said, practice anatomy is normally much more about visual stuff, much more about identification of things. In this chapter, there's a little less of those types of questions that I can ask, but it becomes more of identifying anatomical structures. For chapter 5, there will be 10 questions, each question worth of 1 point. So here you're being asked to drag the labels to identify different planes. In this case, we're seeing this imaginary bone cut in different planes, different directions, and we're asking you, what plane is this? This is really, I think, chapter 1 material, but it kind of mixes it up. So we're seeing longitudinal section divides something in a lengthwise. So we're seeing the length of the bone divided. Cross section cuts it in half. So you're seeing like a horizontal cut through the structure. An oblique section is a plane that doesn't align really to the X, Y, Z axis. It's kind of in a weird angle. So we're getting this kind of a crooked view of the bone, if you wish to describe that. So again, your textbook will explain this in great detail, as will my lecture videos. If you haven't had a chance to see those yet, don't worry, it will become more clearer, these questions, as you work through those. Here we're seeing tissue questions. You're being asked to identify each of these tissues that you're being shown. So what we're seeing here, you're dragging at the box to here where we're seeing that the lining of the ducts of the sweat glands being highlighted. So sweat glands are important in helping with temperature regulation, thermoregulation in the body. Here we're seeing coverings of the surface of the skin keeping the pathogens, keeping any invaders of the body away. Here we're seeing a nice histological view of aligning of the internal surfaces of the urinary bladders. These cells can change shape. And finally, we're seeing lining of the lumen of the small intestines, so the inner wall of the small intestines, helping to maximize the absorption single layer of cells, so it's easy for them to pass, materials to pass through those. So really, your textbook will be your best buddy for tackling these questions. For this chapter, I have some further questions here. We're seeing different types of connective tissues, and again, you're matching each of these descriptions or terms to describe what you're seeing here. So we would see reticular connective tissue, which provides support for the framework of the spleen, for example, is found also at the bone marrow and lymph nodes. We're seeing also areolar tissue, a few things that could apply to that, with, for example, forms basement membrane of epithelia found in the fascia that holds the muscles together and forms the serous membrane of the lungs. And finally, we're seeing here the fat cells, adipose tissues that store energy and provide thermal insulation as well. So really, your textbook will cover all of these, and then you have a chance to kind of use these to guide yourself to read through the textbook. Again, we're seeing here different types of connective tissues, hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage, and the statements that apply to each one. I know I'm going a little fast, but you will have the recording to come back to and pause if you want to look at those. Here we're seeing again different types of connective tissue. Here we're seeing a bone, for example. We're seeing dense regular connective tissue and dense irregular connective tissue. In an irregular connective tissue, the fibers of the connective tissue are kind of to all directions, whereas on a regular one, they're aligned nicely to the same direction. Here, what we're seeing is true false statements regarding nervous tissue. We know, again, you will use your textbook to read onto that, and then we'll expand later on the semester on that. But nerve cells, neurons are carry electrical impulses, receive and transmit, carry onwards electrical signals, are often protected by other cells known as neuroglia. We can see those electrical impulses passing through them, and this electrical impulse passing through a nerve cell is due to change in a membrane potential of a nerve cell neuron. On this question, you're being shown a nerve cell and you're being asked to identify different parts. So here we're seeing dendrites. You can consider them as little antennas that collect messages from around the nerve cell. This information passes to the neurosoma, the cell body, where the nucleus is as well present. We might, for example, do some calculation. Is the signal that we're receiving through dendrites strong enough that we're going to pass that onwards? And if we pass it onwards, we pass it along to the axon terminals that then join to other nerve cells. We can also see nuclei of glial cells supporting cells around neuron here. So this is showing us a nervous tissue that we're seeing here. So the questions are really kind of straightforward from your textbook along those lines. What we're seeing here, we're seeing a smooth muscle shown as a diagram. This is a stomach, and then from the first part of the small intestines, from a duodenum, you're seeing that there's smooth muscle around these tissues. So you see those muscle cells, kind of a spindle-shaped cells with a single nuclei centrally in each of these muscle cells. These muscle cells are not striated, so they're kind of same color, all of them. And here we're seeing a cardiac muscle cell. I think we saw this picture earlier on. You see that it's branched. It has a single central nucleus. It has these lines running across it. Those are known as striations. And at the ends of these branches that connect to other cells, we see intercalated discs. Intercalated discs are an adaptation of cardiac muscle cells that facilitate easy passage of materials and messages from one cell to another so that the heart contracts at the same time. Final question in our practice anatomy for chapter 5. Here we are seeing a skeletal muscle cell. We're seeing multiple nuclei in a single skeletal muscle cell. Now, typically these nuclei are located at the edges of the muscle cell. We're seeing those striations, those stripes running through, and we can see a single muscle fiber there highlighted. So that really is what I wanted to show and everything that I had on mind for today for us to look at. But like I said, I'm all about questions. If you have any questions, feel free to share them either at the chat or just unmute yourself. If you don't have any questions, I think we've come to the end of everything that I wanted to cover today. I know it was a pretty fast one. On the coming weeks, I think we'll focus more on the content than going through these general household questions, these general how the course runs questions. Let me just check real quickly the post on the chat. I hear that there's no questions, and I'm glad that you're not so nervous about the class anymore. I absolutely, this warms my heart and my soul to hear that you're not nervous. I really will help you every step of the way. This is my job to make sure that you reach all of the goals that you have for this class. Like I said, if you're ever struggling with chapter 1, quiz or practice anatomy, I did cover those during our first meeting of the week on Wednesday. So just check the end part of that recording. And that really concludes it for today. I'm going to let you go and enjoy your evening. I know I have one student staying behind. We're going to do some troubleshooting of the Connect, but for everyone else, thank you. I really appreciate you joining here, and I look forward to working with you this summer. Have a good night. Perfect. I'm just going to post the recording so we can chat about your troubleshooting. And let me stop it here.